It's really funny, when I was pregnant with my firstborn, we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. And we came up with like 100 girls' names, and we had one boy's name, and it was a boy. So it was pretty easy to name him. It's not always that easy when I'm naming my paintings. But I thought I would go through today a few of the ways that I kind of get to the names of pieces. And we'll start with this one. This piece is called Conversation. And as I was painting it, I really felt like that's what was happening, that there was a conversation going on between the red and the blue. I'll just move over to this side. The blue was really strong and really had like firm arguments and logic behind it. And the red was more soft and floaty, and they were trying to have a conversation. And so that was the name of it. And it really, as it was developing, I knew that that's what it was. So that's one way that I named it, that I've named pieces. And for this piece, I think that really worked. So the way that I named this one was a little bit different. It started off in one direction and then took a turn. You can see last week's video for an example of that. But this one really, I thought it was going to be called Linen and Leather. I thought it would be very kind of contrasting, minimalist, simple, white with one black strip. And suddenly I was adding a bit of water and I was making drips, and I went in this other direction that I wasn't really ready for. But I had to follow it. I had to follow that muse down the road, and it ended here. The title, I've Known Rivers, comes from a Langston Hughes poem. It's a line in the poem of The Negro Speaks of Rivers, and it's a very powerful poem, and I knew that this piece was much more powerful than I'd anticipated when I started. But it had no other option but to be titled that. That's what the title was from the moment I sprayed the first spray. So naming this piece was a little bit different than the other two. What ended up happening was I finished painting it, I loved it, and then I had to get to know it. I had to really try and think about what I was feeling in that moment of finishing it, in that moment of creating it. And now that I'm looking at it hanging on the wall, what does it say to me? What does it mean to me? And usually when I'm looking for those answers, what I do is I'll go online and just try and be among words. Poems, quotes, novels, anything that will just get my mind thinking of a way to focus what this means. What I ended up finding was a quote from a poet that I've loved since I was 12, and her name is Nikki Giovanni. The piece is called We Go On, and the quote was, "We go on because it's the hard thing to do, and we owe ourselves the difficulty." And that, to me, was what was going on here. That was what the piece was about, and so sold, done, named. But I do have to take that time sometimes and really go deeper and look in different sources to try and figure out what's happening and the best way to focus the words to create the title for these pieces, because it's not always, doesn't always pop into my head. And I make a lot of work, so I have to make a lot of titles. The last challenge that I have as an artist naming my work are my women, because they have names. So that's a completely different story. I tend to see attributes in the women that I paint in the various sizes, and the smallest ones I wasn't naming for a very long time, but now the smallest size that I have is this 12 by 16, so I name all of them. So coming up with a name is not always the easiest thing for me, but I try and look at those attributes and then bring it to a name, and I'll do name searches and I'll try and say, okay, this one's very fiery, what should we call her? And then she's called Serafina, because that's a reference to fire, a reference to flame. There are some as with the other paintings, there are some that name themselves quite immediately. The 6-foot woman that I did was Grace. At the last stroke, that's who she was. There was no way around it. There are other ones that I'll name for the person that I created them for, or for a special person in their lives. But this is this series ends up being a combination of all 3 ways of naming paintings. It just ends up that they're all proper names. So that's it. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you got an idea of how to name a painting if you're naming paintings. If you're not naming paintings, if you're just enjoying paintings, I hope you get an idea of where the artists come from when they're trying to name a painting. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that below. If you'd like to go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, then you can see all the new pieces that I've been working on. And if you want to leave in the comments your favorite color, I would love that. Okay, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.